Hey, what's up, everybody? This is the Sixer Sense podcast. I'm Uriah here with Chris. We're here to talk Sixers, all Sixers, and nothing but the Sixers. A couple of impressive victories on the road. How was your Thanksgiving, Chris?
It was wonderful. How was yours?
It was pretty good. Pretty good. A lot of people that I know are getting a little under the weather. That's the reason why Lucas is not here tonight. If people are wondering, Lucas is not feeling well, but I'm feeling pretty good. How are you feeling?
I'm feeling pretty good, too. Ready to talk some Sixers.
Hey, before we talk Sixers, I have some good news. So I covered the Blue Coats game on Friday night. I couldn't watch the Orlando game Friday night because I was at Chase Fieldhouse Arena. So a lot more people this time, I think, because the Sixers were on the road. About 2,000 people were in the gym. Really nice, family-friendly atmosphere. The mascot, Cody, is running around interacting with the kids, and they had all the kids line up and do like a what do you call it? The line where you put your hand on the person in front of you, like Samba line, or what was it called? That line where well, you know what I'm getting.
Yeah,
at, right?
I know what you're getting at.
So anyway, they were doing stuff like that. And, you know, it's a G League game and people came out to watch a good game, and it was competitive. They beat the Greensboro Swarm. I think they won by like 7 or 8 points. But after the game, here's the point of the story. I had an opportunity to ask a question of one of the players, and I'm going to give you a chance to guess which player I got a quote from after the game. I'll give you a hint. He used to play for the Sixers last year.
What was the hint? Sorry.
He played for the Sixers last year. He played a couple minutes.
He played a couple minutes for the Sixers last year.
He had a really cool haircut.
Oh, Charlie Brown.
Yeah, Charlie Brown Jr. After the game, he was signing autographs, and I saw an opportunity, and I went in, I took out my cell phone, and I asked him a couple questions, and you could tell he was really appreciative of it. Getting some love and getting his name quoted in an article that I wrote. But yeah, he's really tall, really athletic, and he is a much better passer than people give him credit for. He had a lot. I think he had like 6 or 7 dimes in that game, and I think that was one of the questions that I asked him about. So yeah, Charlie Brown Jr. and
Very
I know
cool.
Lucas would love that.
Yeah, seriously. Awesome. Well, let's segue now into the Sixers game. We're going to start with their win over Orlando on Sunday night. Uriah, 133-103 is the final score. It was pretty much Philly all the way through in this one. Let's start with some of the starters. 29 points, 7 dimes for Shake Milton on 10 of 13 shooting. 25 on 10 of 14 shooting for Tobias. 11 for Melton, 9 for Montrez. And then another scoreless night for PJ Tucker. We'll talk more about him later. What were your thoughts on the starters in this game?
Well, I think Melton, him and Milton, they've proven themselves to be a pretty good duo. And in this game, both of those guys just kept their foot on the gas. Melton opened up shooting. I think he nailed an early 3. Shake was aggressive. Didn't score too many points in the first half, not as much in the second half. I was really impressed by Montrezl Harrell tonight. Not so much because he was, scoring points. It was how he was scoring points. And it could have been Doc trying to take advantage of some of the mismatches. Wagner could not hold Trez. I mean, he was very physical. And if someone else was guarding him, whether it was Paolo Banchero or other players, the experience that Trez has over those guys, you could just tell the difference in how he played versus them compared to other veteran teams that he has not played well against. Tobias, obviously, in the absence of the other stars, has stepped up in multiple games, including tonight. Really impressive. He scored from everywhere. And I think Tobias is, I don't know if people will say, oh, he earned his keep in these games, but against Orlando, he definitely was taking advantage of familiar rims because he used to play in Orlando at the beginning of his career. But yeah, those are some of the things that I took away from the starters. What about you?
Yeah, no, I agree all the way around. This has been a handful of really impressive all-around team efforts in a row now. Obviously, when you're down your three best players and your three most prolific offensive creators, you don't really expect to win many games by 30 points, no matter who you're playing. Obviously, Orlando is not a very good team right now. They are also dealing with a slew of injuries themselves. They didn't really have a point guard in this game, which hurt them quite significantly after Suggs went down the other night. But even so, it's a very impressive win. I think at least 4 out of the 5 starters put together really solid outings. But we're going to talk more about Shake. He's just kind of been the story of this run. He's playing awesome basketball. This is the kind of production and explosive offensive output that we maybe were expecting a couple years ago when everyone was pegging him as a potential Sixth Man of the Year candidate, and that never really panned out. He had a really down year that 2021 season. But hey, I mean, he's only 26. He's at the very front end of his prime. He has plenty of time to get his career going in the direction that he wants to, and he's putting together a really remarkable run here. That's definitely going to turn some heads and put some eyeballs on him. So Shake deserves a ton of credit for his recent play. Tobias as well has been awesome since those guys went down. And as much maligned as he has been as a number 4 option, and maybe he doesn't fit that great as a number 4 option, he's still a pretty darn good number 4 option and the kind of guy who can scale up and put up big numbers when called upon in these kinds of situations. So he deserves a ton of credit, playing great, smart, efficient basketball, as does Shake, as does D'Anthony, as you mentioned. Just a lot of good stuff all around.
Yeah, the thing that stood out that you said was Orlando being down several key players themselves. Even if those players were in there, though, Chris, I would argue that we would have still beaten them because, Markel's still relatively young. Cole Anthony is still young. And I think the inexperience showed, particularly when they were just trying to get into an offensive set. I don't think I can remember a game where there were this many turnovers. And in so many ways, it just looked like whatever the Sixers were doing, Orlando not only couldn't match it, but it was like they weren't even trying.
Yeah.
And if they were trying, they were really sloppy, really sloppy.
Yeah, I think the counter argument there is that the 3-4 main guys they were missing are all point guards, and those are the guys who get you into those sets traditionally. Like young as they may be, Suggs and Markel especially are 2 very smart, talented playmakers who would help a lot in that specific situation. Cole is very comfortable handling the ball and getting into those sets, so they're missing the exact kind of guys who help with what you're pointing to. So I do think, I agree, Philly played great. They probably would have won if Suggs was in there, for example, still. But when you're missing all 3 of your point guards, it does hurt your ability to set up the offense and run.
What about Point Bull? Come on, Bull out there handling the rock. I was impressed by Bull. He disappeared though in the second game, but
yeah, Bull's awesome. Franz is awesome. They have some really good players. And that's a very interesting and compelling young team. But when you're down all your point guards and you're as young as they are, you're just not going to win too many games yet. And Philly is taking advantage, to their credit. They've played awesome. Let's talk about the reserves now, Uriah. Again, a pretty stellar all-around outing. 19 points on 5 of 8 shooting for Daniel House Jr. Easily his best game, most prolific game of the season.
Oh, yeah.
He made 10 trips to the free throw line. He was everywhere in that second half. Another really good Paul Reed game, 12 points, 13 boards, 30 minutes, 3 steals, 2 blocks. 5 turnovers isn't great, but all around, pretty awesome stuff. 6 of 6 from the field. And then 17 points for Furkan Korkmaz. What were your takeaways from the second unit in this game?
I will leave Paul Reed all for you, Chris. That is your guy, and I know you have plenty of analysis for him, but I want to go to Korkmaz because, look, if this is the Korkmaz they get for the rest of the season, we're going to the championship because he was amazing all night. All right, of course, I'm being effusive with that, but the point is Korkmaz, he shot well, he was distributing well. There was one play when it game didn't matter. But fourth quarter, he did a little give and go with, I think, Melton at the top. Gets the ball, drives to the rim, does a behind-the-back pass to Paul Reed. Paul Reed then fakes his shot and kicks it back to Furk. Furk nails the three. It's confidence like that where he's playing free, he's playing loose. Maybe there's not a lot of pressure on him because they don't have their stars, and they're in Orlando. So maybe that influenced his style of play tonight. But just big shout out to Korkmaz. He needed this game, and I think down your house too. But you said all of his stats, but that's what stood out to me. Niang, obviously, really great offensive player. Surprisingly, had some nice defensive plays in both games. Didn't shoot very well from beyond the arc tonight, but he did have some nice drives to the rim. Had a reverse layup in the first half. I was impressed by that. What about you? Anybody stand out on the bench to you?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, Paul Reed's been really awesome since Joel went down. He was a plus 28 in this game, which I believe is the highest mark on the team. Like they won his minutes pretty handedly. 12 points, 6 of 6, 13 boards, 3 steals, 2 blocks. What more can you ask for in 30 minutes from a guy? He continues to be really impressive whenever he gets the chance, and obviously those chances have been amplified quite significantly with Joel out. I would hope at this point that he's pretty much locked into those backup minutes when Joe gets back. We'll see. Montrez is playing pretty well himself, but it's pretty clear to me that Reed's the guy they need to be leaning on. But you never know for sure with this particular head coach. Look, Daniel House is a guy who has been notoriously streaky over his career. He started the season in a bit of a slump. I know you in particular were pretty hard on him, and a lot of fans were. It's nice to see him getting into something of a rhythm. He's a guy that has the ability to help this team on both sides of the ball when things are clicking. And like you said, Furkan was really good in this game, and he's the kind of guy who has stepped up in the past in the place of injured players. We know that he's capable of putting together some pretty impressive shooting nights, and this was one of them. Hit all 3 of his 3-point attempts, 4 dimes, 17 points in 25 minutes, only missed 1 shot from the field. It's pretty hard to beat that. That's a really amazing, well-rounded bench performance from a guy who was hurt not that long ago, who's still working his way back from an injury, so to speak. So really impressive stuff all around. Again, a 30-point win under these circumstances, no matter who you're playing, is going to take a pretty impressive effort from everyone. So,
hey, real quick, how about that play? Paul Reed, pump fake, drives to the basket. I think Al Abdelnaby said he's like, oh, it's Dr. J, Statue of Liberty. Goes up with one hand and just jams it down. That's a highlight that needs to go in his reel because that was amazing. I'm probably going to go back to the game just to watch that one play.
Yeah, he's put together a nice little bit of a highlight reel this past couple weeks. I for that spinning layup in transition the other week, that was fun. So
the one to beat the halftime clock.
Yeah,
that was amazing.
I'm enjoying all the good Paul Reed content. So let's talk a little bit more in depth here about Orlando now, Uriah. They are currently just 5-15 on the young NBA season. Are they fully in tank mode? Do you think they're one of the favorites to land Victor Wembanyama at this point?
I definitely do. Look, Bol is getting significant minutes, and I thought he was out of the league after Denver couldn't find a purpose for him, and he kind of meandered. I think he was in the G League, if I'm not mistaken, and surprisingly, he looks pretty good out there. Wagner, both the Wagner brothers, they have nice talent, but nothing to write home about. As far as Terrence Ross and you disagree?
Franz is awesome.
Right.
Mo.
Okay, I'll give you that.
Mo is. I agree. He's like a back of the bench guy, but Franz, if we were like redrafting last year, would get like 3 or 4. He's really good. I
will give you that. Franz is a nice player. He has a really bright future. But if you look at Gary Harris, Terrence Ross, some of these old vets on that team. I can only imagine, no matter how much money they're making in their contract, to play on a team like this that could very well be in tank mode. And they got a number one pick in Paolo Banchero, who's getting all the attention, obviously, and looked a little rusty the first game back and looked not good at all tonight. But I think when Markelle comes back, and I thought he was going to play tonight. I saw reports all over the place. Markelle's going to make his debut tonight, but he didn't. Cole Anthony's a nice young guard, but I just don't see this team winning more than 25 games. I don't know what you think about that. What do you think?
Yeah, they're definitely in tank mode. They're definitely one of the teams angling for Wembanyama. Again, we talk about key injuries. They're missing Wendell Carter Jr. tonight as well. He might be their best player. They're down 3-point guards. That is not the full strength version of the Orlando Magic.
I forgot about him, by the way. You're right.
But even at full strength, this team is just too young to win a lot of games. I think they're a very compelling group. Defensively, they have the tools to be a really high-level defense some nights. They have a lot of length. Some would say too much. You can't really have too much, but they are absolutely loaded in the front court to the point where they might need to start looking at a trade or two ahead of the deadline or ahead of next season. Obviously, Bol coming into form like he has made things more complicated for Mo Bamba, who broke out last season, who's now back in a bench role. So they got some stuff they have to figure out. They have a lot of interesting young talent. I think that's a team that in time could be very good. And maybe it won't take that much time, but it's not going to happen this season. As much as I like all their individual pieces, I think Franz is a straight up star. I think Paolo's a star. Bol is leading the league in block percentage and hitting 40% of his threes. That's an awesome player potentially that they've unearthed. And Wendell is a really good all around big who does things on both sides of the ball. But right now, again, 5-15, they're just not winning much games. They just lost by 30 to the Sixers with Tobias and Shake. So they're not going to win a lot.
Is that why your fantasy team is called what it is? What's it called? Franz?
Only Franz?
Only Franz?
Yeah.
You're so clever. So clever with words.
Thank you. But I will say, if they add Wembanyama to a team that has Mo Bamba and Bol, I think that's great.
Oh, my God.
It's an excellent commitment to the bit, and I would like to see it.
That would be interesting.
It'd be hilarious. It'd be great.
Yeah, it would be like I don't want to say freak show, but it would be circusy. You know what I mean? To see all these huge players on the court, and then Joel Embiid's there looking like a forward next to them.
I'd like to see it. I want to see it.
I thought you wanted to see him with Chet Holmgren.
I do. Either
OKC.
way, you can't go wrong. Any of the teams that start with O, I'm there for it.
I have a prediction. In the year 2030, the average height of NBA players is going to jump, and every team's going to have a 7'4" guy running the point. 2030. Wait, how many? It's 8 years away. All right, maybe 20 years down the line. But
hey, look, if we're all alive in 20 years, that's a win for me.
All right, let's go ahead and transition. So, Groundhog Day a little bit. We're going to talk about the Sixers versus the Orlando Magic, but the first game, which was more competitive. We're not going to spend too much time on this game, but let's just go with, we're not going to do starters or categorize it by reserves. Let's just talk about what stood out in this game to you, Chris, the first win on Friday night.
Let's talk about Shake Milton. 24 points, 9 boards, 10 assists, 1 rebound shy of his first career triple-double, I believe.
Shea gets a cheer for that one.
Dude has just
almost
been off the
triple-double
charts lately. Don't know what else there is to say about it. He has been truly remarkable these past few games. Tobias, 23, 10, and 5, maybe not as efficient as he was in Sunday's win, but pretty darn good as well. And again, like the bench showed up. That was a much better George Niang game. Hit 5 of 7 attempts from 3. They got contributions up and down the roster. 0 points for PJ Tucker, keeping the streak alive here lately. But other than that, there really no complaints. And we're going to talk about PJ. I think some of the PJ stuff is a little bit overblown, but a good win given the circumstances. Again, extremely shorthanded, a lot of guys out. You'll take what you can get as far as wins, and they've won 2 in a row now with Joel, James, and Tyrese out, which is pretty remarkable given how much they've struggled in the past with Joel out. So.
The first game, when I watched it, I think I watched it Saturday. And of course, I knew the score, and I was just taking notes and just focusing on the play of certain players that might have to figure out where they fit in once Joel and the rest come back. And one of those players is Montrezl Harrell. You look at what Paul Reed has been doing in that Friday night game, crazy on the glass, a lot of putback shots, playing excellent defense. There's nothing you can say bad about Paul Reed, in my opinion, over this stretch. Nobody's perfect, a few turnovers here and there, but he's done his part. And Montrez, although he has been offensively demonstrative, is that the right word? Yeah, demonstrative of his skill set, his defense Friday was terrible. And I think that was the game in the first quarter. The bigs for Orlando, they were just taking over. They had all types of points in the paint. Completely different from tonight, but that's what happened that night. I think Trez struggled on defense. Tobias played really well. Shake, like you said, it was his night. And to all the haters out there who were like, "Oh, he'll never amount to anything." And Shake Milton, where's he from? He went to SMU. That's not like a top tier school. Look, the kid went through the G League. He's dealt with a lot of different lineups, just like Tobias, and injuries, dealt with that, different coaches. So he's adjusted his game, and now that the opportunity has been presented, Shake Milton is taking advantage of it. Ultimately, in my opinion, I think he's auditioning for his next team, and I think this stretch is going to get him paid, and good for him, because his contract is one of the best, cheapest, most, economical, a steal if you're looking at the production-wise. $1.8 million, and he's balling out, without Harden and Maxey. So Shake Milton, we'll talk about him later, but I was really impressed by those players in that game.
Yeah.
And let's actually focus on two particular players right now, Chris. Both of them are bench players. Typically without the starting lineup, but they've at least Melton has been inserted into the starting lineup. Let's just go back and look at game 1 through tonight's win, 20 games, whatever it is. DeAnthony Melton and Georges Niang. How impressed have you been with both of those players in particular this season?
Extremely impressed. I've gushed about Melton on this podcast and very recently on the site. I think DeAnthony has been everything Philly fans could have hoped for, considering the price they paid. Basically, Danny Green's expiring contract in a year that he's not going to play, and a late first-round pick. You can't do much better than that. Melton offensively fits what this team needs quite perfectly. He has stepped up consistently when guys have been down as well. And obviously on defense, he's their best guard defender. He's someone who causes a lot of problems for opposing teams on that side of the ball. One of the best pickpockets in the NBA. Like a really, really impressive two-way player who has done a lot of good things for Philly. And George, last year, was their best bench player by a country mile. And were it not for Melton being as good as he's been, he would be Philly's best bench player by a country mile this year as well. He's been awesome. Bit of a slow start to the season, but he has really picked it up over the past few weeks. He's just an elite shooter. He has gotten a little bit marginally better on the defensive end. He's making all the unselfish connective plays that you want out of a guy like that. And he's just a really awesome regular season player. Now, it gets a little more complicated, of course, in the playoffs when teams are going to be more precise and they're going to go after him more. And we'll have to see how he holds up in that environment eventually. But as far as the regular season goes, it's really hard to complain. His shooting is really important for this team, especially when Joel and James are healthy, but it's equally important when they're not, frankly. And he has continually shown up and put together some really big nights lately, so he deserves a ton of credit.
So I'm looking at D'Anthony Melton's stats right now. And in 17 games, he's averaging 11 points a game, averaging 27 minutes, 42% field goal percentage, but 38% three-point percentage. I think that's what he was brought here for, as well as his defense. I think his addition was the worst thing that could ever happen for Matisse Thybulle, who I think is going to be traded at some point before the deadline. But Milton, when I saw highlights of him, and I'm sure you looked at him too when he was in a Memphis jersey, you see this guy driving the lane, getting up for dunks, making nice shots from beyond the perimeter. I'm thinking, how did we get so lucky? But again, that was like the transition. He hadn't played for us yet, but past 17 games, he has far exceeded my expectations. And if he continues this, he will be the most valuable role player for us. And in games where someone might be out, whether Maxey misses another game or Harden rests for a game, I think we all have that confidence now that if he comes in, we'll be fine. He'll stabilize things. He doesn't take a lot of risks. He always seems to be steady with whatever he's doing on the court, defense or offense. So I love Melton. As far as Niang goes, look, he continues to surprise me. For a guy his size, and I'm not knocking him because everybody has different shapes, he gets the job done, showing a little bit more athleticism than we would assume he didn't have. But you said it earlier, his shooting is remarkable. He's one of the best spot-up three-point shooters in the entire league. And he has like a cool nickname, the minivan. How can you not like a guy that accepts that name and just goes through life? Hey, I forward for the Sixers, three-point specialist. And by the way, my name is the minivan. And by the way, he has really embraced this community, doing podcasts, great interviews. He says the right thing, but for whatever reason, you see that guy, you're like, I trust that guy. I think he gets us and we get him. So big ups to Melton and Niang.
Yeah, those guys were awesome.
All right.
All right, Uriah, let's look forward a bit now and talk about how this team is going to look once they eventually get healthy. Obviously, Joel is expected to return sometime in the near future. We're probably at least a couple weeks away from James and Tyrese getting back. But eventually, ideally, knock on wood, this team will get healthy again. How complicated do you think it'll be for Doc to mesh all this talent that seems to be bubbling up out of nowhere now the guys are hurt? How do you think it's going to be? How complicated do you expect it to be for him once everyone's back? How is he going to make all the pieces fit together again?
I think it's going to be very complicated because, look, if you look at places like Boston, places like Golden State, except for when Golden State plays on the road because they stink on the road this year. But teams that have played together for a significant amount of time, and when I say time, I mean seasons, plural. You can't beat that. So when Maxey comes back and Embiid comes back, Harden comes back, they're still coming back to a roster that hasn't had a lot of experience playing together. And then you have guys who have flourished in this environment because they have minutes just laid out in front of them and they grabbed it and they took advantage of it. What happens to their mental state when they're now back on the bench, maybe getting 10, 12 minutes a night, where most of the shots and plays are called for Embiid and Harden and Maxey? I think it's going to be very complicated. I'm not optimistic because, I don't know, Doc doesn't give me much optimism because he can be stubborn. But I think it's going to be very complicated. And the reason why, one last thing, you have Joel Embiid, post-up player, can do a little bit more, but like the way he generates offense for this team is very unique. And then you have Harden, who's an offensive specialist. He has a unique role. And then you have this speedster, Speedy Gonzalez, Tyrese Maxey, who's coming into his own. These are all crazy dynamics that it's like a problem you wish to have. But now you have Shake stepping up and Tobias is stepping up. Like, where's all this going to go? I'm a little worried. What about you?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely understand the concern, but I don't know. I don't really think it's as complicated as all that. I mean, frankly, the rotation is just going to go back to where it was. I think Shake has earned more minutes, and we'll talk more about that. But beyond that, the same guys are going to be getting minutes. A lot of the ball handling opportunities are going to go back to James and Tyrese because that's where they should go. Like, as great as this run has been, you want the ball in James Harden's hands. You want the ball in Joel's hands. I don't think you're going to sacrifice a ton of offensive possessions to get the likes of Shake and D'Anthony and Tobias more ball handling opportunities, because it's just not the best use of the offense when Joel and James are back. Like, Joel and James have to learn how to play together better. There's still some chemistry to build there. There's still some rhythm that those two haven't always been on the same frequency, and they're not there yet. And these injuries have probably hampered that even further, which sucks. But beyond those two kind of figuring out their dynamic, I really don't think it's that complicated. Like, the offense is either going to run through Joel or James pretty much 48 minutes a night. Those guys are going to be staggered. If they're not, then it's going to go through Tyrese. Like, beyond that, the other guys are going to have to learn how to fit in. We've seen Tobias buy into his 3-and-D role pretty well. Melton's very comfortable in that role. George is very comfortable just standing on the perimeter and checking up threes. The main question mark, like you said, is probably Shake at this point. Like, what happens with him? He's going to need to get to a place where he can bring this level of energy and bring this level of aggression to 10 or 15 minutes a night instead of 35. And that'll be an adjustment for him. He's going to have to take more spot-up threes. That's always been something that he doesn't do enough of when everyone's healthy. Like, the onus is going to be on Shake to adjust to those guys. I don't really think you need James and Joel to adjust to Shake, because as wonderful and awesome as Shake has been these past few games, he's not anywhere close to Joel or James. And once those guys are back, you have to tailor the offense to them. And that means Shake, if Shake wants a long, successful career in the NBA, he's going to have to show that he can tailor his game to star players like that. Because no team in the NBA is going to run their offense through Shake Milton. He's just not that kind of player on like a full-time 82-game basis. I don't think he is, at least. I think he's potentially a very good and dynamic bench player, but I don't think he's a guy that you're going to build a team around. So he's going to have to show that he can adjust. But yeah, I mean, it's very complicated. Like you said, there are a lot of different dynamics at play, but at the same time, I think it's kind of just going to go back to what we saw before all the injuries. And they're going to have to get better at those specific dynamics, but the power dynamics at play are going to be pretty much the same, I think. So let's talk more now, specifically about Shake and about Paul Reed. Uriah, do you think those guys have cemented their minutes in the rotation after this run? Do you think those guys are kind of locked in? Or are you worried that once everyone's back, Doc might still be tempted to maybe ride with Montrez in certain matchups, or to push Shake back to the periphery?
If Doc is smart, he would start now and give both of those guys as many quality minutes as possible, and not worry about Montrez's relationship with the coach and anybody else, because they're showing Doc who they really are. I think Paul Reed is coming into his own. When he's down on the block compared to the past few seasons where he just seems out of control, he makes a move and you're like, that's a good move. And then he executes it and he scores it. And he gives you offensive rebounds, which Montrez doesn't really do. The defense that Paul Reed is, I think, much, much better than what Harrell gives you. So if I'm Doc, I'm like, look, Trez will get some minutes, but the majority of the minutes should go to Reed. And as far as Shake is concerned, I'll sing his praises all day because I like how he plays. It's not many players, good players, that are on such great contracts that can score on 3 different levels. And we've seen him do that all week, going back before Thanksgiving. And I think Shake Milton, look, if anything, it'll give Doc, or it should give Doc some, I guess, more trust in that if he needs to sit some of his starting guards for whatever reason, foul trouble, maybe they're a little banged up, what have you, or maybe there's just, a matchup where it's not like a top tier team, throw Shake some more of those minutes, because the more confidence he gets, the more momentum that he carries going on through the entire season. When the playoffs come, Doc can rely on those two. What do you think?
Yeah, no, I agree 100%. I especially agree with that last point. Like, Tyrese and James were playing way too many minutes before they got hurt. And whether or not you want to blame the injuries specifically on that or not, is up to each person. But regardless, they're just playing way too many minutes, especially James, who is coming off of a lingering hamstring issue, now a foot issue. He's getting older. Like, you really shouldn't be playing James 40 minutes in any regular season game. And that was happening a couple times. Like, that's just not it. I agree. Like, throw Shake some more of those minutes. He has earned it. Shake was a guy who was not playing very much to begin the year, and I think he should be playing more. He's absolutely 100% worked his way into that conversation. But like I said, like, it's going to take some adjusting on his part too. It's really him who has to adjust more, I think, than James and Tyrese and Joel. Like, he has to get better at striking the right balance between being aggressive and like just learning how to play off of those guys. More threes, more spot-up jumpers, that kind of thing. He can play like this, but we don't always see this level of aggression when everyone's healthy. And some of that is because, like, appropriate, because you can't be taking too many opportunities away from the stars. But Shake's going to have to learn how to strike that balance. But he has earned the opportunity to do that. And we all know that I think Paul Reed should be backing up Joel Embiid. Trez is the third string center at this point. Right? There's really no two ways about it. I don't know if Doc agrees with me, but he should.
Of course he should.
Yeah, if Joel is healthy, we shouldn't be seeing Montrez ever, in my opinion.
Yeah, agreed. So, let's switch gears here. All right, the final topic tonight are some question marks on the Sixers roster right now. One is a starter and one is a bench player. You mentioned it earlier, and it's now time to talk about PJ Tucker. We could have talked about him last time we talked, but this pattern is continuous. He's still not contributing much of anything on offense. He gets the ball, and there's movement, dribble handoffs. He's very reluctant to shoot for whatever reason. What do you think about PJ Tucker, and what do you think about Furkan Korkmaz? Like, I don't know, there's confusion in my mind. What do you think?
Yeah, honestly, I think a lot of the PJ Tucker panic on Twitter or wherever has been pretty overblown. I think it stands out. I think the fact that he's not scoring is a valid point of criticism, or it's worth pointing out. But I think it stands out a lot more when your top 3 scorers are missing. When everyone's healthy, you really don't need PJ Tucker to score a lot of points. He's just not out there to do that. He's hitting 39% of his threes this season. It's not like they're not falling. He's just taking about 1 fewer per game than he was last year in Miami. Like, the volume isn't there, and that is worth talking about. But when everyone's healthy, again, you have Joel, Tyrese, James, Tobias, all these guys eating up shot opportunities. You really don't need PJ out there trying to do a lot on offense. And as long as the threes are falling, and as long as defenses still respect him from distance, especially in the corner, which they should, because again, those shots are still falling. I'm really not worried about it. This last couple of weeks have been pretty egregiously absent of points, and but that's going to correct itself. Regression to the mean is going to happen. He's going to hit a couple eventually. It's just statistically likely that he will hit a couple at some point. And on the season, those shots have generally been falling. So I'm really not worried about it. Defensively, he's been pretty awesome most nights. He's handling the toughest assignments every night. He's doing a lot of what you would expect out of PJ Tucker. So I really don't have any huge complaints with PJ. He's had a couple of rough games offensively these past few weeks, but on the whole, I really don't think there's a lot to panic about. And again, this is a guy who I think, you signed PJ for the playoffs. And
right.
Really until then, I don't know if there's really much point in worrying about it. If he shows up to the playoffs and the offense is a huge major issue, we can talk about it. But defensively, he's been where he needs to be. It's the regular season. He's 38, whatever. We know he's going to bring an extra bottle of energy to the playoffs. I really don't have a lot to say about PJ. I think he's been fine.
All right. Before you talk about Korkmaz, let me say something about PJ, because you made me think of something. So everything that you said, I agree with. I want to give some specific examples that tell me that he's still adding value while he's on the court, even though he's not making a ton of shots or any shots. So there was one game against Brooklyn where Durant went baseline, and PJ, having played against KD all these years and still having the wherewithal to know what to do in certain situations, used that baseline as another defender and forced KD to make a bad pass. So it's examples like that show his value. And then I guess a subsequent game after that, PJ, Sixers missed a three, and PJ just came out of nowhere, grabbed the offensive rebound and kicked it out. And the Sixers ended up making a shot on that same play. So it's examples like that is what makes him so valuable. I will concede and say the playoffs is what he was brought here for. His grittiness, his toughness, experience. And right now, he just knows his role. And I kind of respect a player like that who understands his role and is okay sacrificing his offensive production so that other guys can have opportunities.
Yeah, I mean, he's only averaging 3.7 points per game. He averaged 7.6 with Miami last year. He's only taking 1.6 threes per game instead of 2.7, despite playing a couple minutes more per night. That, I understand to an extent where people are coming from, but it's PJ Tucker. The guy's role has been pretty set in stone for pretty much his entire career. He hits a lot of corner threes.
Right.
He's a very smart, unselfish, connective player offensively. He's not going to put the ball on the floor. He's not going to look for his own shot. I just don't really know what fans were expecting. Defensively, like you said, he played awesome defense on Durant. Played awesome defense on Giannis not long ago. He's guarding the best players in the world at a very high level. He's rebounding the heck out of the ball. And he's still hitting 38% of his threes. It's not like the three-point percentage is way down or anything. The volume is down a little bit, but it's early in the season. Guys are hurt right now. He's a bit out of depth offensively, maybe because all the really high-level creators are out, and that maybe puts him in more of a precarious position. But once guys are back, I really see nothing to worry about. And it's not like there are no complimentary guys on the bench who can help pick up the scoring slack when guys are struggling. D'Anthony, George, now Shake, all those guys can go and get some buckets when the Sixers need them. So you really don't need that out of PJ. So,
what about Furk?
Yeah,
tell me about Furk. What's going on with Furk?
As far as Furkan goes, I think he's a pretty useful, 12th or 13th guy off the bench. I still think that's where we are with him. Like, talking about Sunday night's game, he can give you 17 points and 3 made threes if you give him the playing time and the space to do it. But most nights when everyone's healthy, he's just not going to be in the rotation. He's not going to surpass Shake. He's not going to surpass D'Anthony. Once Matisse gets back, I think Matisse is going to eat into those minutes.
What about Daniel House? Could he take some of Daniel House's minutes?
I think House is better too. I don't think Furkan is a guy who's going to see a lot of playing time once everyone's healthy. I'm pretty comfortable with that. I appreciate the big scoring nights and the confidence, like you mentioned earlier, the flashy deep threes and the behind the back passes. I can get behind all of that. But, defense is still an issue. He is quite prone to some cold spells, as we are all well aware of. He's just not going to be a regular rotation piece, and I'm pretty comfortable with that.
Yeah, I can't say anything more to that. I actually agree with everything you said about Furkan. I guess with that, man, I guess we can head on out tonight, and I can go watch the Eagles now.
Yeah. All right. To all our listeners, as always, thank you for tuning in to yet another week's episode of the Sixers Sense podcast. Please like, subscribe, and follow along if you can. We are on YouTube, of course, if you're watching. Hit that subscribe button. If you are on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Play, or Audible, continue to follow along. Give us 5 stars if you can. Leave us a review. Let us know what you want us to talk about next. We are on Twitter and Facebook at SixerSense. We are on the web at thesixersense.com. And until later this week, peace out, everyone. Go Sixers.